Oh, can people in the chat kind of give me an idea of what year in school you are? Just send like, are you, yeah, I don't know, high school, junior, senior, sophomore? Okay, just so I get an idea of what the ranges are. Workshop is geared, yes, medical schools in the USA. There are some, I think, kind of mentalities and philosophies that are applicable everywhere, but this is for US medical schools. And also some of the Caribbean schools are also represented on the website. Everything through the AMCAS application. Senior, undergrad, masters. Okay, okay, okay. Gotcha. Big mix of traditional and non-traditional students. So for both camps, I hope I can make you feel better by saying last night I actually worked through the website with a very non-traditional student from Prescribe It Forward who had an associate's degree in English, did a master's in English, then did a master, was a teacher for a while, and then he did a master's in medical science, and he's now a second-year medical student at Wisconsin. And we were actually, even though the paths were very, very different, some of these same philosophies applied. So we'll walk you through, and hopefully I'll give you some lessons to really make the most of what is a very confusing and difficult process, and expensive. All right, so we're ready to go then. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the landing page for med school stuff. And thank you again to MCAT 101 for hosting me. I already told you why it existed. Essentially, you see acceptance rates of schools that are below 5%. But what's not very advertised is that 40% of everybody who applies ends up getting into a medical school. So to me, I was thinking, how can it be possible that some schools have, a lot of schools have less than a 10% acceptance rate, but 40% of everybody who applies each year gets in? To me, that says acceptance rates are inflated. So it means people are sending applications to schools that either they would not attend to if they got in, or they're really not qualified. And so the pool is kind of swamped, and you shouldn't be so much looking to those to make your decisions. The other one I saw is that 25% of applicants are applying more to more than 25 schools. That's the largest subgroup of people reported, more than 25 schools. So at $100 a pop for each application and all those secondaries, it's a lot of time and money. So for me, I was wondering, is that necessary? Do I have to do that? Because I did not want to. I don't think most of you do. And then the other one is when I was trying to pick out of school states. I'm from Indiana. I wanted to go elsewhere, kind of. I'd been in this state my whole life. I thought I wanted to go somewhere else. But then you look at the out-of-state acceptance rates and you see really low percentages or high percentages, but they take very few students. I didn't know how to actually pick a school effectively. So I'm going to answer those questions for you. And as always, use the chat. Sim is monitoring the chat, so she'll bring up questions as they come about. Yeah. So the first one then, because I saw there was a lot of people who are very early in the pre-med class, in the pre-med kind of process, or your life rather. It doesn't really matter what your major is. These are not causal. There's the mix between cause and correlation. But to me, when I look at this, I say it doesn't matter what your major is. And when I got to medical school, I realized my classmates had different backgrounds, different majors. They did different extracurriculars. They came from, everything was pretty much different. So instead, I was looking, okay, what are some unifying extracurriculars that if the major doesn't matter? And one is shadowing and healthcare volunteering. To me, this really just says that you need to have background, like just some clinical experience. Because when someone gets your application, you're paying a lot to be at those schools, but they're investing a lot in you and accepting you. It takes a lot of time to train a medical student, and it's a long life. So they want to be sure that you know what this is and that you know you want to do this. Okay, so that would be the other one. So when people ask me what kind of things should I do, you should really do what you want, okay? You have to check these very broad boxes of clinical experience, leadership, research, and good academics, but you need to do those in a way that doesn't suck the life out of you. There's some stuff that you just have to get through. There's some classes, whether it's Orgo or whatever, that you just have to get through, but things like your extracurriculars shouldn't be tasks. You should try and find something that you actually enjoy, because the actual name of the thing on the piece of paper doesn't matter too much in my eyes. You got to do something that you can talk about and that you enjoy. To me, that's a much better use of your time. Now, the personal statement, everybody knows it's important, but people don't know how to write them. It's hard. And I think the first part is, at least for me, I was definitely a perfectionist when I was going into this process. And so I wasn't willing to start my personal statement unless I could completely articulate what it was. It would be perfect. Everybody who read it would be like, wow, he's qualified, amazing, and knows what he's doing. But that's not what my first iteration was. It was bad. It was really, really bad. And I'm very thankful that I had some people who tore it out of my hands, drew red all over it, and we went through like 10 iterations of it. And you'll find that once you actually let go of it and it gets further from you, it becomes more like you, because someone reading it, it's the same as someone editing it. They're like, when I read this, do I know Justin? Do I see Justin? And by having other people read it for you, tear it apart, you don't have to follow everybody's advice, but listen, you'll get to actually the good nuggets, the things that people think are really special about you, that really matter, that really kind of crystallize who you are. And the other thing is, it was an interview question that I think I answered well in my interview, but I hadn't thought about before. It was, you need to be able to articulate what it is about being a medical doctor, not a nurse or a physician's assistant, because you can help people in any profession. You can help people if you're a therapist or if you're a sanitation worker, whatever it is, if you're a chemical engineer, whatever it is. But there's some things that are unique about a medical doctor within the healthcare field that we can talk about later if you'd like, that I think are important to kind of focus in on. Okay. To that point, letter writers are the same thing. You need people, and by doing activities that you really enjoy and invest yourself in, you find people who get to know who you are, and that's rich. And I can tie my success to people who really knew who I were to guide me to write good letters. And that part is key and not emphasized, but showing up to office hours, just showing up is a huge part of it. Doesn't even matter if you get all A's, although you probably will get more A's if you just show up, but go to office hours, go to the tutoring rooms, you just show up. It's half the battle. Most people do not show up. If you have the gumption and the hustle to just show up every day, day in, out, that you make calls and work hard, it goes way more than being competent. There's even videos for medical students that are emphasizing when we go on rounds, we don't know anything. So if doctors are asking questions, we don't know anything. Patients are asking us questions, we hardly know anything. We know a lot, but not very many useful things for people. But the three keys are kind of availability, affability, and ability, in that order. So are you around all the time, showing that you're invested? Affability, are you an okay person to work with? Do people want to work with you? Because ultimately you're making a hiring decision. And then 3, are you somewhat competent, or at least know what you're not good at? Okay, so enough about that one then. We're going to go next to talk about Mcat and Gpa. Actually, before we talk about that, I want to show gap years. Medical students are getting older when they come in. I mean, that's just kind of how it's going. More experience, you need to know that you really want to do it. I think gap years can be really, really good. But you need to ask yourself, are you taking a gap year just because you're scared? Are you taking a gap year because you don't really know what you want to do with your life? Are you taking a gap year because you need to study for the MCAT? If you take a year, you really need to make it worth your time, and you need to have something to show for that. So, time is money as well. So really make it worth your time, and don't worry too much if you've been out of school for a while. It's the improvement and kind of in grades that matter. And that's what the non-traditional student was really emphasizing, is he busted his butt once he knew what he wanted to do. And he made calls, and that made the difference because he didn't have a good MCAT and he didn't have a good undergrad GPA. So he needed another way to stand out. So you'll see most people work, people study for the MCAT, research, things like that. These are just some commonalities. Okay, we're going to go to GPA next, but I'll pause for any questions. Okay, how lenient are med schools really with repeating courses, both in sciences or not? I wouldn't worry about that too much. I think there are more important things to focus on. I definitely, when I was combing through my application, there are certain things. Oh, Anna Rude, would you like to would you like to speak up? Sorry, you rose your hand. Do you want to explain your question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You can just continue. I just had a follow up once you were done, but
All right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I didn't want to answer a question you weren't asking. I think there are kind of more important things there are grades on my application that I saw that hurt. Even though it's not a bad grade, I got a B+ in Social 100, which for me was a topic that I actually kind of cared about. But because I thought the professor didn't really care and other people weren't really engaged, for some reason, I let that pull me out of just doing it to get a good grade. And that really burned. And then I got a C in my Calc 2 of my freshman year because before I had somewhat conquered, or at least was aware of my perfectionist mentality, when my grades started petering down for Calc, I was like, screw it. If I'm not going to be great at it without an enormous amount without very little effort, then I'm not going to do it, which is a terrible mentality. And you really shoot yourself in the foot with some of those things. So how do they look at it? How lenient are they? I don't know. But at a certain point of the day, you have choices to make. If you want to redo a class, get a good grade on it. That's something you can talk about. I mean, that's fine. Don't let it hold you down. But you also need to move on because there are more important things about you rather than a B, a C, or a D in a class. You got to keep moving. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. If you can just really quickly, obviously like with the coronavirus and stuff like that, a lot of institutions have moved to like a pass fail type situation for some of the semesters.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it's been kind of a rocky year. So my grades have really shot down. So the upward trajectory that we always talk about is kind of non-existent right now as a sophomore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I still have my junior year to try to bring it up, but that pass fail type thing, especially when you're doing it for 2 semesters and you're doing it for multiple classes, from who the people that I've talked to is a little bit of like a point that I'm going to have to explain away or something like that.
It's hard because medical students are actually dealing with this same kind of conundrum right now. I don't think any of you are aware, and I hope not, but the step one, kind of the big, are essentially our Mcat turned to pass fail. So I just took mine. I got a numeric score, but the students who are below me will have pass fail. So some when we're applying to residency, some schools, they take their step in their 3rd year. Some schools, they take their step in their 2nd year. So you'll have people with numeric scores and people with pass fail in the same application process. And so medical students are wondering the same thing. They're like, how will it look? For some people, it may benefit them. So for some people, it may not benefit them. We have these ideas kind of, but those haven't kind of folded out. Now, what I will say is everybody is having a hard time right now with COVID. So it's not like it's just you're the only one in the 333 million people in the United States and the tens of millions of students that are having maybe not the best grades right now. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Like you said, you're a sophomore, and honestly, you are thinking about medical school, being proactive way more than I was when I was a sophomore. I started really thinking about like, what do I need to do in the spring of my junior year, which is not a good idea. But what I had done before that point is I was involved in extracurriculars that I cared about. I had good relationships with faculty on campus. I was a good student. I worked hard. And, those are kind of the things you have control over. So I know it's not a good thing to say to an anxious person, don't worry about it, because it's a bit reductive. But just understand that you are more than just what this semester is and that everybody is going through it. You have a lot of time left. It may not feel like it. Already 2 years has gone by and the spring semester flies, but you have a lot of time. Does that answer your question? It doesn't answer your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay. And then what do you mean by calls? Well, very concretely, calls for the certain student that I'm thinking of, it meant that he cold called when the guy is on the faculty list. And a big thing for him was he was an English major. And so he had this kind of personal statement. It's that 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Can't remember the author. If somebody knows it in the chat, send it to me because it's killing me. But he said he had this kind of personal mission statement, and he knew exactly what he was going to ask of the guy. He said to him, all I need is an interview, because I know if I get the interview, you're going to like me. And he also told him about what his background was, which was that he had a hard home, people who didn't support him. He went into school only wanting to help people. So he went to be a college counselor because he had crappy college counselors, Stephen Covey. And, that's all he wanted to do. And then later that kind of morphed. And when he ended up becoming a teacher, he saw that the students in school were getting pulled out of school because their parents were sick so that they could work third shifts and try and support the family. So he saw all these things that were kind of pulling him back to healthcare. And so that was his story. And so it might not sound very good coming from my mouth right now, but when I was listening to him last night, I was enthralled. I was like, it's things like that matter more so. So when you have a call, I put this in kind of the last part of the website in my parting advice. Whenever you reach out to someone, make sure you have something to say. And this kind of goes to the gap years. If a year has gone by and you haven't done anything, it doesn't look very good to just say, and like, hey, I want to get in, but I haven't done very much to get here. Yeah. So when you call, I mean, literally you call people at that school, you call students at that school. You might get lucky and somebody writes their name on your application to be your first reviewer, and then they make sure you come up in conversation, they fight for you. But, remember, you got to have something to say. And so do some kind of self-reflection. I can ask. Send message. Okay. All right. So are we ready to move on then to kind of talk about Mcat and GPA? I'm seeing many nods from the black screens. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Okay. So this page takes a little while to load since it has a ton of data on it. I have probably like 100 graphs on it, so bear with me. Kind of the broad things that we're going to talk about is at a 10,000 feet view, GPA and Mcat, what are the acceptance rates? Okay. And then we're going to look at demographics. So the nationwide statistics don't matter too much. You want to know, for people who look like me, who live in the state like me, what kind of applicants are they? And then the other part is, where do they go? And so I'm going to show you how to pick out-of-state schools, what kind of states have more out-of-state applicants, and that kind of tells you how many applications you may have to submit. And then that's it. So pretty straightforward. Okay. First thing I want to focus on then, right here. Let's see. Let me get my Zoom in order. Acceptance rate and GPA. These are from a national level. So I've been told my Zoom pauses when I move this graphic. Is it working okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So we see this heat bar on the right says number of accepted students. Okay. So the people who get in, it's no mystery that they have very high GPA, right? So you see the grouping right here, boop, very high. So above like 3.8, 3.4 to 3.8 is the vast majority of people who are actually accepted. The MCAT though is a bit more of a stretch. You see the MCAT's on this side right here. Let me see if I can move it in a better way. It's on a bell curve. It's not like GPA. Everybody has a GPA who's applying, but the MCAT is built to be on a bell curve. So it naturally separates people out here. I think another way we can even look at it is you see the curve. So this axis right here is the MCAT. The curve is kind of like a sigmoid, right? Whereas the GPA, it's more linear. Everybody's grouped towards the top. So that's how I kind of see the curve aspect of it versus the GPA, which doesn't really tease people apart because most people are applying with high GPAs. But this information is not as useful. It's just to give you some perspective. What I think is much more useful is saying, okay, what kind of applicant am I? I'm white. And so what GPA do most white students have and what MCAT do they have? So for me, when I got my MCAT score back, I had a 513. I thought, oh my God, I killed it. Pumped. And I was pumped, and I still am pumped. I'm very happy I got a 513. What I realized is for matriculants. So matriculants is the people who get in and attend a medical school. Bit different from accepted student. But matriculant, it's actually average. So you see here, or the median rather, there's 513 MCAT is average. So that's good. I was average for the people who get in, which means I have a good chance of getting in. To me, your acceptance rate is kind of the difference between look, this green line and the blue line. So it's very small. So it means it's unlikely that I wouldn't be accepted at that score. But I tell you what, when I was sitting in the application process and it took until the last cycle in April, after a year of biting my finger and sending emails, it didn't feel like I was pretty certain that I would get in. So my next kind of question was, okay, so if I'm actually normal for most people who get in, you know, why would it be delayed that I didn't get in very early? And like, maybe how many options did I really have? Because I wasn't actually as competitive as I thought I was. I was quite average for my scores. Okay. Yeah. So you can also see for your state, you know, some people think that California is more competitive. Just kind of see what's going on in your state. Okay. Any questions about that part? Let's see, I can't open the chat. Oh, applicants are viewed in a national pool. Oh, so you might have to explain this a little bit, but this California graph, the AAMC says, okay, all California students, what were their MCATs? Did they get in? Did they not get in? So that's what this is. And then up here, this is national. So everybody in the nation with this GPA range and this MCAT range, how likely was it that they were accepted to at least one medical school? Does that answer your question, Z? It's fine if it doesn't. So when applicants apply to X school, they are not grouped from each state. Oh, so you might be asking a different question. So you're saying if I'm the IU School of Medicine and I receive applications, I'm going to say, okay, all the California applicants, all the Wisconsin applicants, all the Texas applicants, and then compare them amongst each other. Is that what you're saying? Ah, okay. Well, this is the trouble because I'm not on an admissions committee. So I can't tell you if they actually do that. To me, though, I think that this data is meaningful because it tells you relative to people in your state, maybe how likely you are to go to a more competitive institution. And to an extent, I think if the AAMC reports it this way, it might mean that it's meaningful. Because if it wasn't meaningful, they probably would just give us the national stats and say, okay. But to me, I'm saying if they go to this kind of level of detail, this level, and it doesn't go any deeper than this, then maybe it's meaningful. But I'll kind of show you how you can use it to pick the most competitive schools to go to, a kind of good heuristic using the data from the MSAR and kind of the missing link with the MSAR, which is that they give you the data, but they don't tell you what you should do with it or how you stand among applicants and how school stands among schools. Okay, does that answer your question though? So that was the question. Okay, it does, okay. Is there a graph that has total state applicants? There is, and we will get to it later. Okay. So we talked about demographics, kind of where you fit on this curve. So finally, let's get to the what decision do you actually make, or how can you kind of start making decisions? The way I thought about it is as competitive an applicant is, they should apply to as competitive a school is. Does that make sense? So I was an average applicant, so I shouldn't have been applying to Harvard. Keep in mind, though, when I'm talking about picking schools, the other thing you need to have in this process is some peace. So I don't want you to not apply to a school that you really would have regretted not applying to them because you liked what they stood for, or you just love the area, or whatever it is. You still need to have some peace with it. So send your applications to some reach places or places that it's not very likely to get in if you really want to go there and you would regret not applying. Understand that you might not have a very good chance of getting in, but if you make that conscious decision, I think you end up feeling better when you end up kind of with the cards in your hand. Okay. So when I say competitive applicant, competitive school, this is what I'm saying. So this data right here, if I fall on this part of the curve, I'm going to show you below, I'm going to apply to schools on this part of the curve. Okay. So it's kind of simple in concept, but it's simple for me because I've spent hours looking at this. So if you have a question, let me know because it's not straightforward. It's simple, but it's not straightforward. Okay. So I was an applicant, I told you 513 from Indiana. So let's do Indiana. Okay. Let's see. And you'll notice with some of the schools with fewer applicants, these curves are noisier. Okay, so there's less people. So when I generate a random distribution, the curve looks noisier. If it's noisier curve, it's probably less defined what Ncat GPA you have to get in for. But for the vast majority of people, I think this is useful. So 513 looks right about median for people in my state as well. So I was smack dab average for white people across the nation and smack dab average for white people or people in Indiana rather. Okay. So when I'm looking to consider schools, I say, what schools are smack dab average? Here, if you scroll down, I can't scroll at the same time as keep this hover thing open. You'll see Indiana right in the middle of the list, right above MC, Georgia, Augusta, and below Illinois. You'll also notice that in here, there is a lot of state schools. So to me, I was thinking this kind of confirmed some of my suspicions, which was I was an average applicant from a school with a good, big public state school. I probably should have just applied to my public school. I definitely stood the most a chance of getting into my public school. Okay. So let's say I was, I don't know, an applicant way over here. Okay. So 520 MCAT, crazy. I'd be way above average for Indiana as well. So maybe I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll apply to some out-of-state schools or something like that. So around that same point of the curve, which was right around here, I'll look at that same kind of spot. Here we start seeing more of the private schools, the very competitive California schools. And then we kind of get to the Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Mayo, things like that as it starts petering out. So I kind of wanted to show you the GPA one. Like I said, MCAT's on a curve, so it splays people out, kind of distributes it. GPA, everybody scrunched up towards the side. So this one, I think on the right is a little less informative, somewhat useful. But I think the MCAT one is, for me, was like, okay, if a school is just doing sort by descending, which one do I really stand a realistic chance of getting into? This doesn't tell you anything about at what point in the cycle that you'll get in. Because for me, even though I was average and was pretty sure I'd get in, I got in late. I was the last round of regular decision, but there's people who were later from my state who got in off the wait list. So even though things kind of shake out in this way, it certainly might not feel like it while you're going through the process. Are these schools updated every year? So do you mean the graphs on my page, are these updated every year? These are, okay, so these are this year's numbers. So I went to the site, I pulled this year's numbers. You do not actually see the actual numbers for these schools. I think you should actually use the MSAR. It's like $28. And it tells you what the actual score of a school is. Kind of some more information like that so you can make an informed decision about it. The thing is, when you see the score of a school and you see your score, it's very easy to say, well, median 50% are above and below, maybe so that's what I did. That next step is understanding how competitive a school is. Okay, so that answers your question. Are these schools updated every year? Is there a graph that has total state applicants? Okay, I answered the questions, yes. If I didn't answer somebody's question, holler. Okay. We're going to talk about out of state. Any last questions before we kind of move on? Anna Rude. Yes. Question. Go for it.
So for you, like you had mentioned that you were an average applicant, so you were kind of able to measure both your GPA and the MCAT and kind of compare them. But if one is trying to make up for the other, how do you try to figure out in which bar you should start to look at?
That's a good question. I mean, if I was you, I'd kind of just look right in the middle. I would look at both, and you might widen the amount of schools that you apply to or something. There's not a good answer, honestly. There's not a good answer. I think the MCAT is a bit easier to interpret because all the schools are kind of clumped. But keep this in mind, there's people with vastly different majors who are applying. So there's engineers, there's biochemists like I was, there's people in liberal arts, all different majors, all different kind of GPA ranges, all different schools that have different GPA ranges. So I think GPA is tough for everybody to interpret. So that's why sometimes MCAT is the default. In terms of which one should you use of these two, you should look at both. And I think you'll find that there's some overlap, but understand that these are guidelines. And when you look at MSAR, you'll see the actual numbers and you'll kind of tease out together. These schools right here don't have identical scores. They just have very, very similar scores. So that's why in the histogram, they were grouped together. Once again, you have asked a question that I cannot answer. I hope is that some useful perspective, or at least what other questions you have?
No, that was it.
Okay. Okay. That's a problem with some of these things, is there's not clear-cut answers. So I'm just trying to provide you with data, show you how to interpret it so that you can make your own decisions and kind of have some peace with it. As always, email me if you have questions. Yeah. Okay. Out-of-state schools. Any more questions? What other questions? Oh, I also missed, did you take a gap year? What year should someone take the Mcat? I took it my junior year. I think most people, if you're, are you saying like before the cycle starts or something like that? Lauren, sorry. Let me know how I should best answer your question. And then Z, did I take a gap year? I did not. I did not take a gap year. Okay, yes, before the cycle starts. It's hard to say when you should take it. I mean, my idea with it was, actually, I think you should take it so that you're ready to apply June 1st. Yeah, May of the cycle is when I took mine, actually. I think you need to have your application ready for June 1st. That is a big regret of mine, is that I didn't apply when June 1st opened up. I ended up submitting my application late July. Since like I said, I hadn't started thinking about what I actually needed to do in terms of writing and studying and getting letters and preparing myself. So I applied late, and I hugely regret that, because medical schools have somewhat of a rolling admission. So a super important part is that you are ready to apply when the cycle starts. So what that means for you in terms of when you take the Mcat, I'm not sure. Yeah, and I have some things listed on my site that'll show you some study tools that people typically use, just the most common ones. Does that answer your question, Lauren? It may not. It's okay if it doesn't. And it's also my interpretation. So ask other people to be skeptical of what I say. But I think most people will tell you to apply when it opens. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to picking out-of-state schools. So like I said earlier, acceptance rates are inflated. Same thing for out-of-state acceptance rates as in-state acceptance rate. Okay, we have chat. Oh, how many out-of-state acceptance students matter? That's a good question. That's a really good question. So acceptance rates are inflated. And so what I wanted to do is instead say, how many spots are there available? Because I thought that would be a good surrogate for how much of a chance I really stand of getting in, or at least what schools are out-of-state friendly. Because I saw that term before. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really, I didn't see any data to back it. So I did not know how to understand it when people were saying it. So out-of-state friendly really to me means there's a lot of spots. You will also notice, though, that up here, one of the schools that accepts the most students, Georgetown, is very competitive. Jefferson Kimball is competitive. Drexel is competitive. George Washington is very competitive. You'll also notice that the private schools are far on the right. Private schools don't care whether you're in state or out of state. I think I can even, there we go. Private school, oh, I'll show both of them. Private schools are far on the right. They don't really care. State schools, they are chartered by their state to train their state's physicians. So of course they're going to accept some more in-state students. But there are some state schools that accept a lot of out-of-state students. So University of Washington is one of them, very competitive school. Wayne State, Michigan's a big school. Ohio State. Another one here, let's go to Indiana right here. When I saw the statistic for Indiana, it's around almost 90% of the people who apply. So of all the people who apply, 90% of out-of-state students, okay? But then of the people who attend, so not necessarily get in, but the people who attend, okay, 21% are out of state. So there's a huge difference in the people who apply that are out of state versus the people who get in that are out of state. And it's a much lower percentage than the national kind of matriculation rate. The other thing is, I said the people who get in, okay, the people who decide to attend, not just accept it. matriculants, right? So you might be this statistic may also reflect that out-of-state students apply, they may get in, but they might not choose to attend. Okay. So your calculation either way might be, I'm not going to apply because either I don't stand a good chance of getting in, or maybe I just won't attend that. There'll be another school that has a better offer. My state school gives me a big scholarship. So now I just talked about Indiana having kind of a low out-of-state acceptance rate, but you should notice it's actually very far right in terms of the public schools. Public schools. It is very far to the right. Where is Indiana? Right. So Indiana is the largest medical school in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So a smaller percentage of a large pie is a big number, whereas a larger percentage, like over here, of a small pie is a tiny number. Okay. So the size of the dots reflects how big the school is. Color, public, private. Let me hit some questions right after I kind of show you. This one is every medical school, and it's just showing you have their website URL, but you also have the number of in-state students, the number of out-of-state students they accept. So if you want to say, look for public school, so I'll type in public right here, and I'll do out-of-state students. I'll sort by descending. You see Uniform Services Herbert. This is the military school, even though they're public. It's not like everybody in Delaware, or I can't remember where it is, goes there. University of Washington is a public school, but yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much that. And then I'm going to answer some questions and then I'll move on to the next part. Okay. Let's see. Does how many out-of-state acceptance students matter more, or how close my metrics are? So Naz, that is a balance between how many out-of-state students are accepted versus how many the metrics of the school average. So I think I pointed out Washington, I think, is very competitive. I think it's up here or something like that. Or it's this one, maybe Washington University, St. Louis, very competitive, even though they take a lot of out-of-state students. So it's a balance. With all of these graphs, there's not one good answer. You have to check back, look for things. That's why I put it in both the graph so you understand the concept, and then the table format so you could just Control F and say, this school, what about it? Okay, I hope that answers your question. Do you have any students from Michigan in your class at Indiana University Med School? That is a good question. I don't know. I was based out of the Gary campus, so I know 32 people very intimately, and none of them are from Michigan. One is from Wisconsin, a couple California, two Florida, a bunch of Indiana kids, Nebraska. What else? So I'm not sure about Michigan, but I will say it has people from all over. Do you have free access? Yes, everything here is free. Everything here is free. I don't want to make anybody pay for it. How late did I apply in the cycle? We will return to this at the end if somebody wants, but I essentially, I applied late. I applied in end of July, and I think that kind of ended up hurting me. I can't say it did, but I wish I had applied earlier so I couldn't have this lingering thought of, ooh, maybe I should have. It definitely would have saved some heartache in terms of just kind of poring over it for those months in the summer that I really should have been enjoying and doing something else with my life. But yeah. Okay, Z, by state, does that mean permanent residence or attended institution where the student lived in the past? So this is permanent residence, and this is a point that the non-traditional student that I was talking to last night made, which is he was a resident of Colorado, moved away from Colorado and went to school in one of the Carolinas. I can't remember which. So he removed his residence from Colorado. Colorado was like, you are not one of our residents anymore. And then in North Carolina, then he was taking, he was living there for a little while, was taking in-state tuition. But I believe what happened is when he was applying to medical schools, he was not a resident of any state, it turned out. So I had not heard of that before, but it goes by your actual state of residence, not where you attended school. Okay. Unless you become a resident somehow when you do that, which would be very nice because everybody would go to school somewhere cheaply. Live abroad. Yeah, it's hard. It definitely makes it more difficult. Very broad. Do you think attending a university that has attached medical school can play any benefit? I mean, I think to an extent, right? If you're someone who is going to show up to clinic and volunteer and meet physicians, make a good impression, things like that, take advantage of it, sure. But, you know, I went to Purdue, there's no medical school, and I don't think it particularly disadvantaged me. And I think actually a decent amount of my medical school classmates, they didn't volunteer at the School of Medicine or something like that. They just did other kind of research. So it's certainly not an expectations. Maybe it helps you if for some sort of like hustle kind of thing, you know, if you want to be in the hospital meeting people, but I don't know if it makes too much of a difference. Okay. Do you have a graph for international students who attend college in the USA? I believe so. So let's see, here we are, US territories. It's somewhere in here. Legal residents not in the US. So here we have the graph. Okay. Oh, I got to remove these little underscores. That's a programming leftover. Okay. So I hope that answers that question. You can send me another one if it doesn't. Okay. So are we ready to move on then? And what other questions do we have before we hit kind of this last one? Oh, that's not the last one. This is the last one. What other questions do we have? Okay. We'll keep moving then. So then you have the question of, as I mentioned earlier, are some states more competitive? Or what if I don't have a medical school in my state? What do I do? This is to kind of help people out with that. So there was a question earlier, do I have an actual number of how many people apply in-state, out-of-state? I absolutely do. So this line right here is the 50-50 line. So 500, 500, 1,000, 1,000, 1,500, 1,500. So the people that are in this area, kind of above this line, oops, they're attending more out of state. So out of state right here. People who are more along this line, they're attending in-state more so. So California, definitely an outlier. Tons of students and more people, but honestly not that far from 50-50 going out of state. New York, even though high scores and very competitive schools, a lot of people attend in-state. And then Texas, they have their own separate application process. Nobody bothers applying to, not nobody bothers, but it's harder to apply there. So less people apply there. So in-state people attend. So things like that kind of make sense. Florida, and you can drag and drop. I hope my Zoom doesn't kind of freak out, but you'll see the other kind of boop, 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 the other states in here that you can kind of look for to understand how applicants in your state behave. So the actual decisions do they make? What schools do they actually attend? Which I think is a different and important difference between just what school are you accepted to? Because ultimately you want to understand what decisions people made, not just what options they had. Okay. Do I have Texas graphs? I do, and I will show you how to find Texas. So what I will do is go down here and I will type in Texas, boom. And you have the numbers and then you have the relative percentages of people who attended in-state and out-of-state. You'll see that, okay, my percentages right here, 29 and 52 do not, or 29 and 5.2 do not add up to 100. That's because I'm saying 29% within the total 35% of people who are accepted. So you'll see 35% minus 5.2% is 29%. So just understand that's what you're looking at when you see it. And because I have the number of people who do not get into medical school, I'll probably end up changing this in the future so it's less confusing, but this is how the data is reported. So this is how I'm displaying it. Okay, does that answer your question? I kind of interpreted what you were asking, so let me know. Okay. Would you mind going into detail about the UC schools out-of-state stats later if there is time? Interesting question. So they don't actually have the data on, of the people who end up applying or attending out of state, what are their MCATs? That data doesn't exist. I wish it did, and it was definitely one of my questions, but we just don't have that. It's not reported. It exists somewhere in their databases, but it's not reported. So instead, what I would look at with California is just say, okay, maybe I need to apply to a couple more schools. And I would use just this to kind of say what would be some good schools kind of in my score range. And also, if you know some people from California, who went to an out-of-state school, talk to them. The ones who went to an in-state school, talk to them. You gotta, and definitely, if you go to, if you're just on LinkedIn, you can probably type in like California, medical school, I don't know, Indiana University School of Medicine, and they'll have somebody who lists both those things in their LinkedIn and send messages to people. Another resource you can use is Prescribe It Forward as well. They're helping out with pairing people with mentoring. So if you say, I'm a California student, I'm looking for somebody from California who can offer me some perspective, they should be able to do that. But otherwise, I think just some Googling and talking to people and using my website will get you pretty far. So that doesn't answer your question. Does it kind of set you on the right path? Do you have any kind of questions left over? This is a lot of information, so it's fine if this isn't making sense the first go around, okay? You just kind of need to expose yourself to these topics and think about it and chew it and digest it. I've been thinking about it for 2.5 years now. Okay, at Michigan schools outside UMich, does out-of-state acceptees have lower stats than in-state? I hope I kind of answered that question for you. The data just does not exist. And to a certain extent, you're just gonna have to talk to people and kind of understand what their feeling is. Like out-of-state California schools applying to California schools. Oh, we can split between out-of-state and the accepted. Well, that's great. That is I did not realize MSAR does that. That's excellent. Yeah, MSAR, I think there are some fee waivers for each school at least. Yeah, I think that's going to have to be a case-by-case basis. Just understand kind of the relative position and the relative competition of a school. And then when you look at the in-state and out-of-state, then kind of, there's a lot of fudge room here, but I didn't realize MSAR did that, but that's pretty good. What if we can't afford MSAR? Yeah, I mean, I think the important part is when there's fee assistance waivers, but applying to a lot of schools is expensive. And if you're not sure what you're doing, if you're spending $100 to apply to a school that you don't stand a chance of getting into, to me, that's kind of throwing away cash, and it's a shame. So I think if you buy MSAR, it's a good investment in yourself and really like, okay, what are some good decisions that I can make? There are some fee assistance waivers I think of, but I know that's not a good answer. But we can talk about that later if you'd like. Do you think applying to 20 schools is needed? No. This is another thing. I talked to a student who had a very, very high MCAT. And when I was doing an information session for his class, he kind of said to me, the idea, where would I actually attend? He hadn't thought about it since it was like he had such a high score. It was just like, where can I get in? But if you have a low GPA, low MCAT, you need to be asking yourself the same question as someone with a high GPA, high MCAT, which is, where would I actually go if I got in? If you have a crazy high MCAT, sure, you can go to NYU or something like that, but you might get a really good scholarship from your in-state public school. And let me tell you, when you see, paying $100,000 of tuition, like every year versus paying $10,000, that's a pretty compelling argument. So, yeah, does that answer your question? I don't think 20 schools is necessary for anybody. I think the idea that some people say, like, put your eggs in more baskets, but putting your eggs in more baskets kind of insinuates that you have baskets, which in this case, you don't have baskets. These are possibilities. And the probability of getting into a school, each school is independent. If you get into one school, it doesn't change your probability of getting to the other one, but they're unequal. You don't stand the same chance of getting into one school as you do another. So applying to 20 more schools, it might increase your chance of admission, but school 1 might be like this, and then school 2 is like this, and then 3, and then you flatline. So at some point, it doesn't really help you that much. If 20 schools is what you need to have peace, go for it. Is it necessary? No way. No way. I don't think so. Okay. How many schools did you apply to? Oh yeah, I applied to 8 schools. I applied to mostly reach schools, all reach schools. And I completed 4 of the secondary applications. IU didn't have a secondary application, so in total I had 5. So of the 3, that is like $300 that I threw away because I was too busy during the year and I wasn't motivated enough to do those. And that really hurt. That really was bad. So that's why I say another part of it is you're going to start your school year. You're going to be tired. You're going to be looking at this school and you'll be like, I don't understand why this school is any different from that other and why I should be jazzed to go to this particular school. I'm jazzed to go to medical school, but I don't know why this particular school. And it's going to be really hard to write those letters. Maybe some of you are better at that than me, but it really threw me for a loop. So I didn't finish a lot of my applications. So I wish that instead I had focused on writing a good personal statement earlier. I had stayed on top of my Mcat studying, so I could have taken it earlier. And then I really would have focused on getting into IU, getting into IU and doing everything I could. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Naz. Let's see. Gene. On the stat topic, do you know how AAMC GPA from community college and a university attended both schools? Not sure. Actually, I just helped someone with this. What made you apply to only reach schools? Okay, sure. So for your GPA, the way, oh God, if you search like the guidelines, there's a whole thing for the AAMCAS. Let me see if I can just pull it up right now. AMCAS calculate GPA. Let's see if I can. Med school headquarters. No, here, this grade conversion guide, I think here. Yep. So if you look within this document, I can send it in the chat. I was helping someone with it and I was so confused. But essentially what you have to do is you have to call both your university's registrar, so the community college and the university college, and you have to ask them how they report their grades. Some schools don't give pluses and minuses. Some schools don't give minuses. Some schools don't give plus. So you have to figure out what their grading scale is, and then you match it up to these ones, and then it'll tell you what the AMCAS grade is. Okay. So you have to actually physically call your school's registrar to do that, which is a pain in the butt. That's how it is. Okay. What made you apply only to reach schools? So reach schools, oh gosh. I mean, I can't remember exactly where I applied, but I think I applied to like Hopkins, Harvard, Brown, Dartmouth, Tufts, kind of, schools on the latter end, even though I had done a lot of cool stuff in undergrad. I had good MCAT, good GPA. For me, part of it was I didn't want to regret not having applied, just kind of shooting my shot. You know what I mean? But I should have been a bit more conscious if I was to do that, to maybe call someone at that school and say, hey, my grandma lives in Boston. I can be there any day, or I don't know, I'm there during the summer. I'd love to meet and talk about school, whatever. I should have done stuff like that. In retrospect, I'm banging my head. But stuff like that. So I say reach. So that was like their median MCATs were like, 7 or 8 points above kind of what I was doing. So it wasn't, I think I applied to Ohio State as well. And I didn't get an interview there as well. So that was my reach schools. I really reached. I hope that answers your question. Let me know if you have another one. Okay. So we're kind of getting to 1 hour. So this is, that's it. That's kind of the end of it. And I am happy to stay if anybody has questions. If anybody is looking for kind of how to study for the MCAT, I just took my USMLE Step 1, and I had a friend to kind of who did really, really, really well. And we had the same MCAT going in. He got very, 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 very late he got in like 2 days before classes started to the IU School of Medicine, and he killed his step. He was in the 100th percentile. So I thought to myself, we got the same MCAT, same similar background, same pretty similar GPA, same major in college. If it works for him, it can work for me. And so here, kind of through this page, I'll show you really like how you just need to start kind of small, and that really doing like practice questions. I was doing crap at the beginning, but just by having humility and not caring if I got stuff wrong, I really improved a lot over time. Okay. We have a question about specific resources. Yes, for sure. So this graph right here, right below the MCAT GPA targets in that tab, right here. So this is from the Matriculating Student Questionnaire. So of the people who get in every single year, they're sent a questionnaire, you know, how did you study? What's your family's background? What do you care about? Things like that. And then they rate kind of these popular study tools. So number one, MCAT practice questions. And I agree with this. Practice questions are your best friend. It's better to get things wrong now than on the test. The other one, Mcat Prep books. I love this. Khan Academy is number 3. I think the free resources, totally undervalued. I used Khan Academy for my physics and chemistry, and I got 97th percentile in those. I also worked hard in those classes. I showed up to the help. They did not come naturally. I worked very hard. I showed up to the help rooms. I really made sure I understood stuff. And it showed. Like, how you do in your classes now really matters, not just for GPA, but working towards it. Knowledge actually stacks and builds. And if you spend the time to do practice questions and understand how they're going to ask questions, what questions you'll actually see, then you will really cover your bases. This is kind of my philosophy. Practice questions are like this scatter plot. We're in the green block. It's like what you need to know. The blue block, it's like, okay, maybe. And then, you know, the red block, like, no way. This, like, if this shows up on your test, like, who is getting that right? Like, who knows that? If you give yourself time, though, you really fill in these gaps, make it kind of bite-sized, move on. Okay. That's a tangent. I hope that answers your question. So the free stuff is good stuff, and just do as many practice questions as possible. Do you recommend? Sorry. So good specific resources. Okay. So I hope I answered that one. Based on your experience, do you have to have connections to Indiana? No, I don't think you have to. No, I don't think you have to have connections, but it goes such a long way if you call, so you talk to a current student, ask them what they think, you know, that stuff matters. I don't think you have to have connections. I mean, just the idea of connecting though to someone and hustling, like, that is important. But you got to make sure that when you pick up that phone, they got 20 seconds or they got 10 seconds before they completely check out. You send them an email. I'd like to talk to you sometime. This is my background. You know, I'm really interested in going here for this reason. I'd like to, or not even this. You say, I really like if you have time this week to talk about it or whatever, and to get your input on applying to your school, something like that. Does whether your experience fit the mission statement of school matter? So I think there are few schools that have a mission statement that isn't like every other school. Like, every school is like, we want to help people, health equity, underserved populations, rural medicine, primary care. Like, a lot of people do that. And there's the few schools that really are looking for research rankings. And yeah, so mission statement, it's hard to, most schools look the same. There's a couple like Loyola or Loma Linda that I think are very mission driven. Those are kind of special. You have to have a lot of service hours or whatever it is, or a very specific background to apply there, things like that. So don't worry too much about mission statement. Oh, that's only really applies to very few schools. Okay, do you recommend applying and submitting before I take the MCAT, taking July or August, but want to submit in June? If you're for sure applying this process, you know, if you don't apply, that's another year of your life that kind of goes by. If you feel confident and you've taken MCAT practice tests and you think that you're going to be in a good range, or even, yeah, I think it's worth even applying to the one school you really stand a chance of getting into. And if you get in and you decide, no, I want to go somewhere else, I want to go to a more competitive school, you can choose not to attend. Really, if you choose to apply to just the couple schools or one school that really stand the most chance of getting into, you've spent $400, $500 maybe. And for you, that may be worth it. So yeah, I think it could be good. Just take some practice tests, see how you're doing, and then inform your decision. Because you don't want to come out on the other end thinking like, boy, you know, I should have actually road tested some of what I was thinking and feeling before I did it. Okay, let's see. Familiar with the GPA converting points, bit unfair, different point system. Yeah, there is some baloney. The good thing about GPA is that to me the crowd is so crowded that it doesn't, these 0.1, 0.5 differences to me don't make an enormous difference. At least I think. I don't think they will change how you behave too. With all of these things, you have to think, okay, I have information. Does it change what I do, or can I do something to change it? Otherwise, like, you kind of got to let go of some of that stuff and just think like, okay, where can I move forward from this? Any advice on how to decide which schools to apply to if you're applying before seeing your MCAT score? So this one, I would look at how students in your state really behave. That is the wrong page. Let's pull up the score schools again. So I would just look at to see if you have an in-state public school. Vast majority of people, your best bet is the in-state public school. So I would apply there. That's kind of it. Is you just got to see people from your state. Do they mostly go in-state, out-of-state? If you know a couple of medical students, ask them. If you have an idea, you've done practice questions and you understand what the range of your MCAT or your range of your GPA, do things like that. Okay. You look at those, kind of inform your decisions. Practice, 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 practice. It tells you how far you've come, where you are, how far you got to go. Yeah. I think that's kind of the only useful. Let's see. Do you have any statistics for DO schools? I am working on DO right now. I have just this little bit, and this is not up to date. This is 2017, 2018. So I apologize for the lateness. You can find the actual source data, though. I have linked to it. So it's up there. I'm working on the DO stuff. I know DO is big up and coming. So I hope that these will kind of give you an idea. These will be a little bit more helpful, but I definitely think that's a good route as well. Meeting recording sent out later. I assume we'll have to, oh yeah, she said yes. Okay. In-state public schools are in California, so that helps me. Well, I mean, we can look back at the California thing. Hello, Mr. Obama. That is the wrong page. Sorry, I'm kind of going over time now. But so you saw California was a little bit above a little bit more people going out of state. Call some people from your school, but I would say it's not that different from oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Here we are. Here's California right here. Yeah, so you might have to broaden your net a little bit. That might be part of being a California student, but sit down with some students who are in medical school, or and then walk through this website with them and ask them what they think. I think that'll be really helpful. I know that doesn't answer your question, but that's what I would do if I was in your position. Okay, if the stats out of the school GPA MCAT range, then should the applicant apply? If it's above, you may be underqualified. If it's below you, you may be overqualified. So if you want some schools that are kind of safe to hold on to, which may be your in-state public school if you're very competitive, then still apply to those. The idea of this graph was not to show you the only schools you should apply to, but what are potentially the most competitive schools that you could get into. That being said, reach if reaching gives you peace, and really consciously say, like, I'm going to do it and make the most out of it. Okay, let's see. Terms of recs, does it matter from a professor or a dean? I think the name of the person, I mean, I won't tell you that the name of the person matters, or doesn't matter, rather. It does. But I think what's more important is, like, can they actually say something unique about you that's not said elsewhere in your application, that you were able to publish with them, work with them, whatever it is, have an actual relationship with someone, rather than, oh, I'm this very important person and this student is a good student, So I was lucky in that I worked very hard and for a very long time, for 4 years, with someone who was a distinguished professor in one of the best labs at my university. But I wasn't a rock star from the beginning. Or at the end. I was essentially washing test tubes, but I gradually worked my way up until writing kind of my own small grant from Purdue, doing my own research project which was a total mess. but I learned a lot. So you just kind of have to have people that know you. And that's what kind of doing fun and difficult things comes from, is these good relationships. Okay, Anna Rude, you had raised your hand and it just missed you, but you can totally speak up.
Yeah, my question was just more from like I think a lot of this what you just said makes a lot of sense. But I'm just wondering, so like a lot of the things that I've heard is like your recommendations, you want them to know you, but you also want them to be from kind of different perspectives.
Yeah.
So my question was, for me, I go to a huge school. So even our like recitations or our office hours are like a couple hundred kids. So for me, a lot of my recommendations are mostly going to be coming from like outside the university. So for me, it was like I was just asking, does it really matter if you don't have a recommendation from an academic perspective?
Wow, that's interesting. Can I ask where you go to school?
I go to Rutgers.
Oh, cool. My cousins used to live in West Milford, and I have some family that's still actually living right next to Rutgers. Interesting. Well, even though there's a lot of people in your recitation, academic appointment.
I just mean because like those connections. So for me, like I work at a biotechnology company and I'm doing research for them. So I'm getting recommendations from them or from a doctor that I'm working with. But is it important to have someone from an academic point of view kind of reaching out on your behalf, especially if like as I said, if your grades aren't the best, if you have an academic perspective kind of vouching for you?
Well, I think you've kind of answered your own question. You have 3 letters that are going to be written for you. It sounds like already you're doing something really awesome. So certainly get a letter from those people. You might be very intentional in just saying, you know, oh, this class I have trouble in, or this class I really like. Maybe I can go TA for this professor. I don't know how much time you have, but you just ask them and you say, you know, I'm applying. I mean, you can say I'm applying to medical school and I'm looking to do something in kind of more academic and environment, and I liked your class and I want to work with you and do something like that. That might be worth your time, especially since you said you're a sophomore. You have time. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's not important to have someone academic, but you know, my kind of whole thing was that I wanted to do academic medicine. Like academics was my thing. Everybody, my professor was an academic, my other letter writer was an academic, and my other letter writer was an academic. So I didn't have one outside person. And I can guarantee you that everybody applying didn't have 3 academic people. So I wouldn't worry. It sounds like you're in a great spot right now. I mean, already that you have that opportunity lined up is great. If you feel like this is something you want to do, or maybe want to do, explore it. Don't live with the regret of, oh, I should have asked this person for that thing, or just explore this opportunity. Like, you need to figure out what your options are. And it might be that it's not worth your time, or you really just don't want to do it. And that'll give you some more comfort to really invest in what you're doing and where you're heading. I think it benefits you to explore those options. You might find at the end that it's not worth it or not necessary. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Is the purpose of calling just getting no more? The purpose of calling is really to be, you have to have a very specific ask. It's, I want 10 minutes of your time to tell you why I would be a great, you know, fit for your school. It really, you need to do some self-exploration and really say, like, what are the essential parts about me? Like, you know, it can blow up in your face if you got nothing to say, you know, it doesn't look too good. So if you're going to do that, make sure you really have something to say. It's, you know, it's going to be worth their time and your time.
Justin, when you're talking about calling, are you reaching out to the admissions or the dean of the school?
I mean, I would say anybody. I would look at the profile. Maybe there's somebody from your state or something like that who works at the school, or ask a student who's in that school. There's no kind of right answer. You just kind of have to find somebody that you might vibe with. Okay, Z, you have raised your hand. I may not have answered your question very well. Please let me know what you were thinking.
Oh yeah, no problem. I was just wondering that, is it allowed to like call admissions people? Because I'm not sure if that's kind of not like, it might cause like an adverse effect.
Yeah, I think calling admissions people is pretty dicey because they probably get kind of baloney requests all the time. I think you should probably talk to students at the school. And if you reach out to a faculty member, make sure it's because you have some sort of personal connection and that maybe you're from the same town, similar background, something. You just have to do research because it's a gamble. It is a gamble. It can really pay off, especially if your GPA, your MCAT isn't that high, but you need to have a really compelling reason. I don't think it's necessary for most people. I didn't do it and it still worked out fine for me. Most people don't do it. It's just if you're in that position where you feel like you have something to say and you really need to fight and advocate for yourself, then sure. Prescribe It Forward has mentors as well from medical schools all across the country. And I know Sim has partnered with them as well. They are a good place to look towards to really kind of bounce off what you would say, who you would talk to, if it's right for you, things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Caitlin, I had a question. Please remind me of the question because I remember I had to come back to it. But send me the question again. Okay, Faith, remember to talk about, oh yeah, unique doctor. So when I was asked this question, I was kind of stumped. My answer, which might not be your answer, is that doctors have somewhat of a decision-making role that's different. We have liability, we're managers. And I think to that extent, I'm interested in kind of research and national leadership because I want to change how people think and work in medicine. I mean, I don't think what we do as doctors really changes that much unless we do research. I mean, just even look at how we treat COVID patients. It's so dynamic, but we wouldn't be at dexamethasone if people didn't, do these large clinical trials and change. Even though you're one doctor treating patients, you really kind of amplify your voice by being a unique position of authority, someone who is a day-to-day manager in the hospital. You really change people's lives and not just taking their blood pressures and things like that. That's probably not how I phrased it, but that's what I was thinking. The responsibilities are completely different. And those are the things that I'm looking for is, not just treating patients, but also changing how we treat patients. Okay. Oh yeah, totally. So the person that I'm thinking about, if he's going into his dedicated period for studying right now, his name is Chase LaRue from Prescribe It Forward. LaRue, Prescribe It Forward. This guy. So he might be a good tip for people if people are. He's the director of communications for them. Okay. Can you share why you chose this field of medicine? Everybody wants to help people. I wanted to help people. I think it's one of the most interesting and intellectually challenging and demanding things that you can do. And opportunities for research, and as well, God, it's like, I mean, at a certain point, like people who say they want to like make money or something, there's plenty of ways to go major in CS if you're going to put in this much work and time into being good at something, because you'll make, tons of money coming out. At the end of the day, it's a lot of school. So I just love it. And I can't see myself doing anything else besides treating patients and doing research. And so, so I applied to my school's PhD program. So hopefully I can get in the PhD program and And specialty I'm considering, I have no idea. I really have no idea. And I don't need to decide for a little while, but I'm going into my rotations now. I'm excited to figure out who I vibe with, because that will probably be what I end up choosing. Okay, Anna Root.
I'm sorry for asking so many questions.
No, I love it.
I just had a question. So for our personal statements, like we're always told to we have to make our story, right? Like for the medical schools. Yeah. So what was your process in thinking of the things that you were going to write about, kind of getting a collection of like, these are some of the most important things that I want to talk about.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I did a terrible job on the first time around. I walked around my neighborhood losing my mind. What am I going to do? What am I going to write? What am I going to write? And I just ended up pumping out a piece of crap, but it was good enough because it got torn from my hand and given to other people who actually really knew me, who ended up, most of them were my letter writers, going over and over and over it. And that's how it gets good. But you have to get something out on paper. It might be a bulleted list. I don't really care. But you just have to start. Don't be concerned about it being perfect the first time around. But, you know, my personal statement, I thought it was going to be something about something in my childhood, or I didn't have that little nidus of an idea that I was like, that's when I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't have that. I think that the people who have that are pretty lucky. I'll stop sharing my screen. But I didn't. So essentially, kind of what my personal statement was is, I know what this is. I know I want to do it. And I'm a really good student. Yeah, I was kind of like, you should accept me because I'm low risk. I know this is what I want to do. I'm a great student. I have a great background. I know I'll be successful here. You know, I just need you to believe in me. That was kind of it. It wasn't some, you know, amazing, you know, life story, but still, when I got to the end of that document and I read through it, I thought, damn, I have done a lot of things. It's pretty good. But it was vastly different from what I thought it was going to be in the beginning. So be very loosely attached to your personal statement, and be very willing to give it to other people. But get something on paper the first time around. So even if it's crap and you feel bad about it and embarrassed showing it to someone when it's not very good, at least you're moving along. And I promise you, doing that, you will end up in a better place rather than you poring over it again and again and again and again and again, wondering if the person reading it will get it. That's it. Does that answer your question?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I attend the IU School of Medicine. Anything we should avoid in our personal statements? Everybody wants to help people, so just be specific. It's assumed. There's not too many things to avoid. The things to avoid kind of get shuffled out when you send them to other people to read, because they're like, this doesn't sound like you, or this sounds a little bit crazy, or are you sure you want to use this word? No hard and fast rules besides send it to a lot of people and get ready for the red ink. That's it.
Thank you so much, Justin, for giving all this information to us today. And I know a lot of people have benefited so much. And definitely, even myself, I learned so much today, and I'm so excited to definitely use this when we all apply to medical school. So thank you so much for doing this service for us.
I am happy to. Good luck, everybody. And, you know, take care of yourselves. And remember, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And taking, you know, eating well and working out and taking care of yourself is part of studying. And you got to make sure that you're happy, because you don't want to kind of lose yourself when you're thinking about what you should be or could be or whatever. What do you want? And really focus in on that and keep moving. That's pretty much it.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I will send out the recording to everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for supporting us. So we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much, Justin.
Right. Thank you, Sim. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.